Hi, this is Dr. Frank Chopatini with the Church of National Truth. Today, first, we're going to talk about the $8.01 that we've gained from dividends and interests on our endowment. We have had two things that have been suggested. The first one, the default, is always just reinvest it into the endowment to have it turnover to make more money on that money. The second one, which is a new proposition, is going to be using that money to create a subsection of the endowment to fund a physical church and library. What we'll do this week is it'll be open for voting for members. Members can vote, and they can say that they're either going to vote for reinvestment or towards putting it towards the endowment for a new church. And then we'll break it up, and that money will go towards whatever thing that gets voted for. I think it would be okay for people to do partial votes. So if someone wants to split half a vote one way and half a vote another, that shouldn't be too bad. It just makes it a little bit more complicated on our end for members to vote. They basically just have to send in what they want to do with their allotted vote to the Church of Rational Truth at gmail.com. We tally it up at the end of the week. The end will be probably Friday at midnight. So Saturday we'll go in, we'll tabulate everything, and then for our next video next week we'll go over where are we splitting up this funding. So that's going to be interesting this week, and next week we will see how does that get apportioned out between all those two choices. This week, I thought we'd talk a little bit about capitalism in general. I started playing the game Papers, Please, which is a video game that's about a checkpoint in I don't know if they ever specifically say that it's a communist country, but it's obviously an authoritarian country. So I, thought of the whole communism versus capitalism, and there's a lot of young people who think capitalism is intrinsically immoral. And so I figured I'd talk a little bit about the moralities of capitalism, whether it is moral, amoral, or what are the goods and bads of it. Of course, with our church, nothing is always as simple as something is good or bad. It's more of a let's interpret this and look into it and say, under what circumstances is it good? What circumstances could it be bad? I like to personally use the term beneficent capitalism for the capitalism that I tend to push. First, a little disclosure. I am an uber capitalist. I am very capitalist. I own multiple companies. I have multiple employees. I hire them. I have them do work for me. I hopefully gain money off their labor, off their production. So I am going to be very biased pro-capitalism. Not everybody is going to be on that level in terms of where they sit. So I'm incredibly biased in my viewpoint. So you guys can just take that into account when watching this. But I believe that capitalism absolutely can be used as something that is evil or something that is bad. It depends on how it's being implemented, what the rules are, how level the playing field is. In beneficent capitalism, beneficence is basically the want to do good or doing good for others. It is the opposite of malfeasance, which is wanting to harm others. So if someone is maleficent or malfeasant, they are doing something out of harm or to hurt somebody else, or something that does cause harm to other people is a malfeasant act, or that is malfeasance. Versus beneficence is someone doing something that is going to be benefiting others or helping others. It is a good way of determining is something moral or amoral, is how much beneficence, how much malfeasance is there. Many times it's mixed. It does some things that are good and some things that are bad. And beneficent capitalism is capitalism in a system that is made to have net benefit, and where the goods and monies are exchanged in hopefully a way that is supposed to be beneficial to both parties involved. So I would say one of the aspects of beneficent capitalism is there is a square deal, or a deal where both sides gain from it, and hopefully gain pretty equally from it. That is different than some forms of capitalism where that doesn't necessarily always exist. I would say one of the times where you can see that capitalism can be immoral is when there is not a mutual gain from any exchange. So, for example, if I'm making regulations to the point where you have to buy a widget, but you have no use for that widget, that's no longer beneficent. You have to give me money, you have to give me some benefit, and you don't receive any benefit in exchange. That is not beneficence. That is, if anything, that is malfeasant, because you're getting harm from one person when one person is getting a one-sided benefit. So in a beneficent capitalist society, that hopefully shouldn't be existed, or you'd have to have a darn good reason for having that. So I would say One example, when I was thinking through this, of when is there a time when someone is should not be getting a clear benefit, is probably in those situations in which there is a benefit to society or some other third benefit that's gotten. So, like, let's say for fire regulations, I might have to have someone come and inspect my property that may or may not benefit me. You could argue that it's going to cost me time and energy, and I might have to fix things that I otherwise wouldn't have fixed, and I might not see a huge direct benefit from it. And it's also something that I'm kind of forced to do. But there is a third benefit to society, because now we don't have buildings that are likely to catch on fire, hurt other people, be more of a cost to society. So there are some times where you could argue that, okay, maybe not having a square deal or something that happens naturally could be moral. But I would say it's a nice rough guideline when you look at societies that do take capitalism and have their society based on that. Where are we having shortcomings, or where are we having faults here? Many times people like to show the evils of capitalism, and they point to healthcare in the United States as one of the great examples of, what are the negatives of capitalism. But I would say the people that argue that really don't understand the U.S. healthcare system, because the U.S. healthcare system is very, very far away from true forms of capitalism. I would say that U.S. healthcare is more of an oligarchy, where there's only a couple of big names that are running a lot of it, a lot of small groups that are making all the rules. They're making the rules in their favor, that most of the deals are not a square or equal deal. And then that they do specific things to make it so that it is not a free market, meaning that people cannot just go in and compete to try and get an efficient price to make things fair. In the US, it's not really a free market. It's run a lot by insurance companies. It's run by a lot of regulations. It's run by a lot of pharmaceutical companies. And it's not always equal to be a square deal. One example is when pharmaceutical companies get a patent on a medicine, no one else can compete with them on that medicine. They can just set a price at whatever they want. And although a person buying that medicine is going to be getting a benefit, the benefit is not going to be equal to the dollar amount that they're exchanging for it. So, for example, there was the EpiPen scandal, where basically EpiPens were just made by one or two manufacturers, and one of the main manufacturers just decided to jack up the price of EpiPens because they had almost no competition. It wasn't a free market. No one else could come in to try to drive the price down. The commodity was incredibly expensive, well beyond what a reasonable market would pay for it. So that was not beneficent, because someone was paying much more than it would really cost them. That is causing them additional unnecessary harm and causing a whole lot of extra benefit for the company. And that's really not even, really not fair. That is where you've taken capitalism, and you don't really have true capitalism there anymore. You have a monopoly or an oligarchy where there's only a couple of suppliers who can artificially manipulate prices. So one of the things with beneficent capitalism is that the exchange should be relatively equal to the amount of work done by the company or the group. So, for example, if I am producing a product, let's say, we'll go with widgets because everybody uses widgets as their fake example of a product. If it takes me X amount of time, X amount of labor, and X amount of parts to make this widget, that should be added into the price, plus an extra premium for the difficulty of setting that up, the risk taken in setting that up, and that it should be equal to my profit. So you take all the cost, you add in an additional amount for the pain and risk taken in producing that product, and then you get to a price that should be fair. That profit amount should be equal to the risk that's taken and the complexity, and also the benefit that's given to the person that's going to be buying that product. So that way, when the person is going to be buying the widget, they get it at a good price that is equal to the amount that the person put into it. So the person benefits because the person creating the widget benefits because they get money equal to the effort they put in or the risk that they took. And the person buying it benefits because they don't have to do all those things. They get a widget that they want for a price that is appropriate, and it is cheaper for them than creating the whole thing to make widgets. So that is a good example of it being beneficent. Versus if someone has an oligarchy or a monopoly, they can take that extra profit percentage, and because no one else can drive that price down, if people do still require buying that product, they can take that profit margin and make it much, much greater. That is very unfair because the person who wants to buy it doesn't have the ability to compete. Other people don't have the ability to drive the price down, and that profit amount should be driven by the free market. Usually what will happen is if that number is way too big, so like let's say I'm making a widget and I've got $100 of profit built in there, once that gets large enough, it is worth it for another group or another company to come in to compete to drive that amount lower to where it is equal to the amount of risk and effort put in. And that's where you kind of get the market shifting to the point of forming a stable free market, because now it'll get to a point where it is no longer worth it to put the effort in to make that product because the amount of profit you'll make isn't big enough to sustain that business. And so it eventually will level itself out. You'll get some people who go into it and fail because they miscalculated or because the market shrinks. But with enough time, it'll equal out to be where that profit margin is equal to the amount of work and time put in. So what you would want is a free market. People will be able to compete and get that percentage low. But there's certain times in healthcare with patent law where that no longer is the case. And I would argue that is really no longer beneficent capitalism. That is oligarchy. That is not even free market capitalism. So I would say in general, it can be absolutely used to be beneficial, but it absolutely can be abused depending on the laws, regulations, and how the market is manipulated. Hopefully, companies will be doing things that are both helpful for the people who are buying their products. Hopefully, they're getting a benefit, and that benefit should be kind of equal to the amount they're paying. If I'm buying a product for $500, I should probably be seeing $500 worth of benefit from that product. Otherwise, we probably have an issue where this is really not beneficent capitalism. If I'm paying you $500 for an item, but I only get the equivalent of $20 or $30 worth of benefit, that's not equal. That's not a square deal. That is probably in a situation where it's immoral or could be much more moral. There are times where that happens where it just physically is not capable of making that product for that much. And in that case, the product either doesn't exist or someone is going to have to pay much more than it's worth only because it would no longer exist because of that. There's another argument where people say, well, should someone be making money off of someone else's labor or someone else's work? But if you take that and you look at it just like how people buy products, you could also buy someone's time. There is a marketability for someone's time. Someone's time is a commodity. They are selling it just like a product. So just like you're paying me for a product that's worth a certain amount, you also have the same ability to sell your time for a specific amount. And you can set that at whatever it is. And if those two things are equal, if both sides are getting a mutual benefit from it, I can sell my time to you for X number of dollars an hour, and then you hopefully will be getting at least or more than that amount. In fact, it should be beneficial to both sides. So I should be making more than $15 an hour if I'm hiring you for $15 an hour, and you should be thinking that your time is worth that much where you're getting a benefit from it. The other person is getting a benefit. I actually had an interesting thing come up with one of my friends or someone who was an acquaintance where he was thinking of going into business, and he had this like great idea, and he was like, promise, don't steal this from me, but I'm gonna go and I'm gonna he was in the process of making things like a specialty product. I don't want to go into specifics, but he was making the specialty product, and he started realizing, like, I can only make so many of these products with time. It would be a lot easier if I just hired other people to make these products and then pay them less than it costs me to make the product, and then I can make a profit. And he like thought that this was this new great idea. And I'm like, no, this is how all businesses work. Every business works by providing some product or service, paying some amount to produce that, and then having a difference between the cost and the actual sold price. And that is the profit. And that is how the business works. So that was kind of interesting that he had this aha moment, but really it was just like, no, this is how everything works. We could get into more specifics, or we can go into more argumentative cases, but I would say the benefit of beneficent capitalism is it has its own intrinsic reward system. So someone will be able to be rewarded with the amount of effort they put in. So if someone is able to produce more goods or produce more good not just goods, more benefit to society, they get paid equal to that. So if I'm able to produce $500 worth of benefit to somebody an hour, I'm going to be probably paid close to $500 worth of benefit, versus if I'm not able to produce any benefit, if I'm only able to produce $7 or $8 an hour of benefit to somebody, I'm only going to get that much. So I'm incentivized to be able to produce more benefit for others, because then I get more benefit myself. Versus in other systems, like if you had a purely communist system, there is no additional benefit for me to produce more good. I should be producing the amount of good I want to, or the amount of good that I'm required, but I really don't get additional benefit for providing more good for others. Versus in capitalism, there's a very clear incentive to being able to do that. Now, on the reverse side, if I'm not able of creating good, I also might not be able to get the things that can pay for my existence. So one of the negatives of capitalism, if you, well, this is the hard thing with all societies, is if you have someone or an individual who is not capable of creating good, let's say someone who is severely limited by their health and abilities, where they just physically cannot produce capital or something of benefit, how do you handle that? Because now that person is kind of doomed to not be able to pay for themselves. And that's where not only capitalism fails, people always argue, well, capitalism fails because, well, how are you going to take care of the needy? And the needy is a common problem in all societies. But the problem is other societies also don't fix that, because regardless, you're going to have to somehow supplement that group that is incapable of being able to provide for themselves. So it's not just a shortcoming of capitalism. Every kind of society or every kind of way of handling an economy has to kind of figure out how they're going to cope with that. And I would say the solution usually comes in some sort of combination of some socialism, some communism, some capitalism, to try and fix that issue as best you can. But that's very dependent on the specific situation. It's very hard to just say, oh yeah, just communism fixes that because everybody's given the stuff they need. And it's like, well, you still have a proportion of people who are not creating something. Everybody's going to have to deal with that problem. And I don't think anyone has a perfect solution. Everybody kind of has workabouts to try and make the best out of a difficult or an inopportune situation. So yes, capitalism does have that shortcoming, but I would argue everybody has that shortcoming. And it's something that everybody has to kind of ultimately try to figure out how their society is going to handle that problem. But that is a quick intro to beneficent capitalism. I could go probably much more in depth and into a lot more specifics. I think our tenants have a little bit about, how someone should run a business, or how someone should handle capitalism if they're going to be going into a capitalist endeavor. But I think it is a very fair system if it's run properly. Obviously, if it's not run properly, it can be absolutely taken advantage of, and people can absolutely be harmed by it. But you got to look at how fair is the system, how much is everybody benefiting from what's going on, and then find those times where people are either coerced or incapable of competing, where, okay, this is no longer beneficent capitalism, this is malfeasant capitalism, or a lot of people go, late stage capitalism, where it's just all these complete abuses of a capitalist society, which absolutely can happen, but a lot of it depends on the rules and the fairness, and, are people doing things that are usually malfeasant? Am I doing something in terms of being a capitalist that is done specifically to harm others? This video is going to be way too long, but doing something like selling product at a net loss to drive out competition, that is a malfeasant action. That is done to specifically hurt people. That is where you start breaking apart beneficent capitalism, because that's not done for benefit for others. It's done to actually specifically hurt others in business. So I could go more in depth into specific situations, but this will be like a 2-hour long video, and I'd rather keep these as a little bit more short because it's hard to just pay attention that long. So that'll probably be it for today. Next week we'll catch up. We'll see how the votes go, where that money ends up. And then we'll have another lecture. Thank you so much for sitting in. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or would like to see more videos, let us know. And I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.